So if you wanted to work in broadcasting at all, it was almost impossible to avoid being employed by the state. Now, the non-commercial network was known as the National Programme, not to be confused with the National Party. It was a hotbed, the National Programme, of incipient political correctness. Its journalists were either cynical old hacks with no beliefs at all, or committed young socialists enamoured of big government, notwithstanding the obvious devastation Muldoon was wreaking on the economy. The National Programme's programming was a mixture of nondescript music typified by the inescapable presence of Manuel and the music of the mountains, Christian featurettes designed to lull the elderly into a trance-like transition to the next world, and news and current affairs with a decided left-wing bias. Devil's advocacy was supposedly its cardinal journalistic value. Pull apart the position of the person you're interviewing. But the devil was almost always a socialist, demanding to know of politicians why the government wasn't doing more to solve this or that problem, why it wasn't spending more taxpayers' money on X, Y, or Z. The National Programme was anti-government, even though it was owned by the government, only because it believed that the party waiting in the wings to take over, the Labour Party, would be more socialistic still than the national government, if such a thing were possible. Now, the National Programme's news and current affairs flagship was a program called Morning Report, broadcast nationwide each weekday morning from 7 till 8 o'clock. It was the National Programme's pride and joy, the jewel in its crown, listened to by politicians and bureaucrats, movers and shakers, anyone who was anyone on the cocktail party circuit. It had two anchormen, one of whom was an oddball named Lindsay Perigo, who was decidedly peculiar. When he'd first joined broadcasting, and Donald's alluded to this already, Lindsay Perigo's socialist pedigree was impeccable. His grandfather had been General Secretary of the New Zealand Communist Party in the 1930s, and he, Lindsay, had kept the family flame brightly burning. He was not at all out of place on the National Programme, even if his anti-Christian views were slightly discomforting. He was actually its hottest property and supposedly had a golden future to look forward to. Then something strange happened. Perigo encountered some weird Russian writer and became weird himself. His views turned 180 degrees. His behaviour became a matter of grave concern among his colleagues. When Ayn Rand died, he wrote a tribute to her in the newspapers. He spent a vacation at an oddball gathering in America, organised by an alien cult called the Thomas Jefferson Institute. He would proselytize to anyone who cared to listen and anyone who didn't. He was a worry. Now, it is the same Lindsay Perigo who stands before you today, Heraclitus notwithstanding. Back then, in 1984, in spite of his insanity, Perigo was kept on Morning Report, his colleagues and employers treating him rather as they would a wayward pet. The unspoken deal was, you can keep the job, but don't let your insanity affect the way you do it. However, then he was asked to launch a new 3-minute commentary spot called Opinion on the National Programme, to be broadcast a little later in the morning at 10:30. So he went to his bosses and said, "Are you sure you want me to do this? You know the sort of thing I'm likely to say." "Oh, that's all right," they said. "We want the spot to be provocative." So the project went ahead, and Lindsay Perigo went on air for the first time with a full-on statement of his own beliefs. What you're about to hear is a recording of that. Completely unremarkable and superficial though it may sound to this audience now, try to imagine the impression it might have made in the context that I've described.
In this talk, I want to say things you've not heard on this program before. I want to offer an antidote to the poison that is repeatedly dispensed on this network in programs like Morning Comment and Faith for Today. The message of these programs reflects the influence of 2,000 years of Christianity. It also constitutes the link that ties Christianity to other forms of mysticism and to fascism and communism, or any variant of political collectivism. That link, the common denominator if you like, is the proposition that a man's life is not his own. It belongs to someone else, to God, to the church, to the state, to the majority, to any one or all of them. He lives by their grace, in conformity with their dictates. His body, his mind, and his possessions are at their disposal, to be sacrificed if necessary for their edification. This is the poison I'm talking about. Its name is altruism, its essence that a man's life is not his own. The Christian Church affirmed this proposition eloquently and compellingly over many centuries when it stretched its heretics on racks, mutilated them with thumbscrews, burned them at the stake. Muslims in Iran affirm it today when they bury people in the ground up to their necks and rain stones on their heads until they're dead. Small stones, so that they don't die too quickly. The thugs in the Kremlin affirm it when they consign people to labor camps or psychiatric institutions for daring to think dissident thoughts. East German border guards affirmed it the other day when they shot a man attempting to escape across the border in a bulldozer. The South African government has a special name for it, apartheid. Some black African governments are often so busy murdering people they've no time to worry about a name for it. This government affirms it with the consummate skill of an experienced practitioner. In stymieing Skybus, bankrupting boat manufacturers with a vicious sales tax, in the sheer brazen effrontery of the Prime Minister's declaration that certain products of other people's enterprise are crying out to be taxed, in the legalized piracy that goes under the name of inflation-proof bonds, in tolerating compulsory unionism, in posturing as guardians of morality, telling women when they may and may not have abortions, homosexual men that they may not be homosexual. A man's life is not his own. This is the vile potion poisoning the bloodstream of civilization. It defiles reality. It defies the objective fact that a man's life is his own, that each human being is an individual entity with his own mind and his own capacity to choose how he shall live his life, that this, his nature as a volitional being, requires that he be free to exercise that choice, constrained only by the necessity to respect that freedom in others. This was the objective reality recognized by the Founding Fathers in the American Declaration of Independence, when they spoke of man's inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is the objective reality at the core of the philosophy of objectivism formulated by Ayn Rand, validating and glorifying man, the sovereign individual, not the sacrificial animal, rational self-interest, not abject self-abasement, life here on earth, not in a non-existent hereafter, limited constitutional government, not rampant power lust, laissez-faire capitalism, not the cannibalistic jungle of collectivism. Validating and glorifying these things as it does, this is the antidote to the poison of altruism. I commend it to your attention.